So taking it further, what we have to take into account is that in case you are also able to get the other perspective, then it would be quite possible that the actions which you are taking and the orders which you are passing become sustainable in the eyes of law. So therefore, keeping in view that aspect also, I have been specifically suggested that apart from giving the true position of law as it exists, if I am also able to give the other perspective, that is a perspective possible of the courts, the perspective possible from the other side, so that the actions taken by you are holistic and it become a productive exercise. Now, 3 topics have been assigned today. Number 1, Benami Law, PMLA, and Black Money Act. The powers and the obligations to enforce these laws out of these two have been given by the legislature on the strong shoulders of the Income Tax Department. Why I am saying strong? Because whatever legislature does, whatever our government does, it has got a reason behind it. So number 1, I find that the infrastructure of the Income Tax Department is quite robust in the country. Second reason is more important reason, that the understanding of the IRS officers, particularly the officers who are dealing with the direct taxes, has become so wide and deep rooted that any new law dealing with economic offenses can be implemented, enforced, executed with more accuracy by the IRS officers, particularly those who had a brush with the assessments under income tax law. It is seen by me when I came back from service after resigning in 2017 that the new laws which are posing challenge before us have created a vacuum in the country on both sides, on the sides of the executives also, on the sides of the professionals also, meaning thereby, because this law, these laws involve many laws embedded in one law. So therefore, to implement this law, holistic understanding of many things is required. Because you take any law, you need knowledge of criminal jurisprudence also, you need knowledge of civil jurisprudence also, the financial structuring also, various facets of Indian Evidence Act, procedures of Civil Procedure Code, provisions of Civil Procedure Code, fundamentals of Constitution of the country, and depending upon the legislation we choose, many other things which may be required. So therefore, in fact, a multi-talented personality is required to approach it holistically. So whenever you find it difficult to apply the provisions accurately, I mean, this is nothing unnatural. But with our little understanding, based upon our common sense, based upon the rich experience we gather during the course of working, it is not going to be a very, very difficult task. We can understand it, we can do it well. Taking it forward from there. So there are 3 topics, and the format which is assigned is question answer format. But before that, an overview. So to help me to take up the overview first, I will take up the slides, because with the help of slides, it will be easier for me to communicate my thoughts to you and for you to pick up my thoughts. So if I request for the share screen, I think it is already allowed. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Share screen is allowed on your part, sir.
Okay. Yeah, it's there. So my slides are visible.
Yes, sir, they are visible, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So, in fact, there are 4 or 5 major economic laws dealing with economic offenses in the country. First one is the Income Tax Act itself, which we deal. That is law dealing with direct taxes. Second one is a law dealing with indirect taxes. It could be excise, it could be customs, it could be GST, whatever you may call. Then the next important thing which has come up is anti-money laundering law. Then the next one we can say FEMA, which was already there. Then the 2 recently introduced laws, that is Prohibition of Benami Property Transaction Act and the law dealing with black money held abroad. It is called Black Money Act. So it normally conveys a wrong impression that as if it is dealing with the black money in the country. No, it is dealing with the anything held abroad. So these are the broad legislation. There are a few more. So these are the broad legislation with which we have to have a brush in the course of our working day in, day out. And there is a strong interplay between these laws. This question is asked from me at a number of times that, sir, if this law has already been applied, say income tax has been applied, so whether Benami could also be made applicable, whether PMLA could also be made applicable. So answer of this question is, I would say in one word, as yes and no both. Mostly yes, sometimes no. So the laws have been drafted in such a manner that sometimes the cumulative application of the law is possible. Sometimes the application is made in such a manner that it makes the other law, application of the other law as mutually exclusive. It outs the application of the law. So in that case, it becomes mutually exclusive. But most of the times, if the law is properly implemented, proper provisions are applied, proper facts are gathered, then most of the times, I will explain with the help of examples, most of the times, the implementation will be cumulative. That is what we all need to understand. So whether it is in the course of profession, whether it is in the course of personal life, professional life, business life, or during the course of your service, many occasions will come when a particular transaction, whatever you are examining, that transaction will have the other colors, the other aspersions, the other flavors, which you would require to understand, so that you can not only implement your law properly, but you can have the holistic understanding also. Now this slide, just to keep the session interesting, I picked up from the newspaper. You must have also read it somewhere in the newspaper, that 2 chimpanzees were attached. By whom? By the Enforcement Directorate. Now you must be thinking that, Mr. Taneja, what are you saying? Chimpanzees by the Enforcement Director? What the hell the ED has got to do with it? That is how I say the canvas of these laws is very wide. The expanse is quite wide, and the interplay is very strong, very deep-rooted. So I will, with the help of the slide, I will begin my thoughts on my deliberations on the interplay, strong interplay, as the things are happening. So the thing is like that under PMLA, there is a concept of scheduled offense, which I will explain in detail little later. So there is a concept of scheduled offense. So if a person who does scheduled offense, he may generate some proceeds therefrom, that is called proceeds of crime. So the scheduled offense also included in its list the Wildlife Protection Act, the Environment Protection Act. So by violating these laws, the gentleman who was in possession of these 2 creatures had violated these 2 laws, and that is how he got hold of them. So they become proceeds of crime in the eyes of law, as contended by the Enforcement Directorate, and that is why proceeds of crime is liable to be attached under Section 5 of PMLA, and that is how ED got the power under the law to make attachment of these, to take possession of these 2 creatures, and that is how ED attached them. One more thing was there, that it was also alleged that forged certificate was used for possession. So the act of forgery, which is punishable under IPC, which is also finding a place in the list of scheduled offences under PMLA. So that is how 3 offences were committed, and that is how. But these chimpanzees were attached, confiscated, etc. But thankfully they were handed over to the zoo authorities for the proper upkeep. Then with this case study, I think I will open my further thoughts on how the expanse is too wide nowadays. The thing is like that, this one distillery unit was set up in Rajasthan in 2005, and there were some allegations of Water Pollution Act and Environment Protection Act on the ground that more water was discharged in the river than the license capacity, and the discharge water was not of the quality as was permitted. So when the further probing was done, it was found by the Pollution Control Board that water treatment plant of the distillery was not functioning. So therefore complaint was filed. Thereafter that said distillery made requisite repairs, amendments, and that is how water treatment plant started functioning well. So no further action was taken by the Pollution Control Board of Rajasthan. But as the luck would have been for that distillery, ED checked into, ED stepped into, ED our learned officers from the department, they alleged and gave a finding also that there has been commission of scheduled offence, because both these are scheduled offences, and therefore factory building is liable to be attached. So I was also little surprised that violation of Water Protection Act and attachment of factory building by the ED, how is that possible? So when I read the case properly, I found that the allegations, the findings were something like that, that the more water was discharged, meaning thereby, say license capacity was 50,000 KL, but water was discharged in proportion to 75,000 KL. So that means apparently excess production was done of the distillery unit by the distillation of the alcoholic spirit, and this excess production resulted into extra sales, which is beyond the license capacity, meaning thereby illegal sales, and this so-called illegal sales culminated into earning of extra profit, and that extra profit is where? Nowhere but invested into the factory building. So that is how the entire factory was made liable to be attached, wherein 500 workers were working. Somehow the appellate tribunal gave status quo in the matter. The matter is still sub judice, and the things have to take place. Further trial has to take place of the things. But you see that such a wide connect, that where the Water Pollution Control Board stands and where stand ED, and two different laws, and that is how they have been connected. These two recent news, which I hope you must have also read, that Modi's Benami law has companies running for cover, and many SC/ST members who were acting as front to acquire land in Rajasthan, their entire land of many builders, more than 4,000 cases I think are there, solely from Jaipur, solely from Rajasthan only, before the Urging Authority, wherein the properties, such properties have been attached. So the surprising part here is when this law was introduced, Benami law, the impression which was created was that it has been brought out to uncover the stashed money of various politicians and people from public service, etc. Because for dealing with the offences of businessmen, there are various other laws. But when I read the law, I had said in 2017 itself that it is going to be very, very robust law, very comprehensive law. When Shah Rukh Khan's property was attached, not that Mannat building, that Ali Bagh Bungalow was attached 2017. So my views were published as it is in the Economic Times, whatever I stated. So when I read it, I thought I had said something extra, but I did not make any changes thereafter. And after 2 years, we are finding that the law is really standing on the same pedestal, that now it is covering not only these two persons, but much more than huge variety of persons in the country. It may be businessman, it may be farmer, it may be anybody. Even listed companies have been hit under this new law because of some wrongdoings has been, as per the findings given in the orders passed by the officers. So this law, I would say, new Benami law has opened up a new era in the chapter of the legislation of the economic laws, which I will show you on the basis of certain examples also. Then CBI ED action may now follow IT probes. This also news you must have read. Multi-agency scrutiny. In fact, the inefficiencies, whatever were happening so far, were mainly because of the lack of coordination amongst the departments. But now the way government has set up the things and the way the things are moving ahead, I think with the help of data analytic techniques, most of the wrongdoers will be caught very easily, and there will not be any escape. Though I am presently now on this side, but to my whatever clients come to me, I say now the time has come when you should do the right things in the rightful manner, and you should be in a position that you are able to convince any of the agency or anybody who asks from you that you are doing the things in rightful manner. So you should do the things in rightful manner. You should do the right things in the rightful manner, and should be able to show that also you are doing the right things in the rightful manner. So that is how, because the cost of non-compliance is now much higher than it used to be earlier. Earlier, the cost of compliance was, say, this much, and cost of compliance, non-compliance was this much. Now it has become reversed. Cost of non-compliance is much higher, and the cost of compliance has gone down. So it is always advisable to adopt the route which gives ultimate peace and happiness. Now, SEBI has also entered with an MOU with the Central Board of Direct Taxes. You must be aware about it, and this is going to be another milestone, I think, in the era of coordination between the various agencies. Then this interplay of various laws, just a brief introduction. I have kept here Benami law under the central pivot, you would see, because whatever a wrongdoer would do, he will do something in some other name. He will do something which is hidden, which is concealed, which is disguised. So therefore, I have kept it as a center of the entire wheel, but it is surrounded by everything around it. Whether the person acting in concert are subject to Benami law, because Companies Act now debars Section 90 of Companies Act has made amendment which says that person exceeding that the name of the title of the heading of the section is significant beneficial ownership interest, which needs to be disclosed by the companies. That suppose there is person A who is a shareholder, but real owner is person B. So all these information needs to be provided by the companies to the ROC, etc. So what will be the implication under Benami law if any such information is provided? Then implication under Income Tax Act on Benamidar and beneficial owner vis-a-vis the unexplained investment and credits. This is one of the most important questions which is arising in the mind of every officer of the country, that if the addition under section 68 or 69D, 68 or 69A, B, C, etc. has been made, then whether it will also lead to any action under Benami. This is very, very important question. Then whether there is going to be any impact on the holding company structures for denial of beneficial ownership criteria, particularly those structures which are controlled from the country outside, and then property outside India, whether covered under Benami law or under black money law. Then PMLA invoked, whether Benami law can also be applicable, income tax law also can be made applicable. Then various other similar questions which we will be discussing today. So I will begin my deliberations with this small example which I am quoting before you. Suppose a person does smuggling, and in his income tax returns he shows that he has earned income from trading, say rupees 10 crores, and files the taxes, and that's it. That's the end of the matter. So whether there is any violation of income tax law? No, because he has paid full. Whether there is any violation of PMLA, because he is showing in the income tax return as income from smuggling. So there will be very difficult to prove that there is money laundering concept. Then whether there will be any issue under FEMA? Yes, there may arise some issue of FEMA. Black Money Act? No. Now, if I change the facts a little bit, suppose I change the fact like that he has earned income of rupees 10 crores, but in his income tax return he shows income from trading activities rupees 8 crore, and out of rupees 8 crores, rupees 2 crores he retains abroad in his undisclosed bank account, and out of remaining rupees 6 crore cash he gives this to one company there, namely company B Limited. His company's name is say R Limited. That company B Limited should give a check in the form of share capital to R Limited, and company B therefore gives a check in the form of share capital to R Limited. R Limited allots shares to B Limited, whose real owner remains Mr. R. Let's suppose the name of the person is Mr. R and his company's name is R Limited. Then what are the possible violations which have taken place under the law? Let us take one by one. Firstly, there is violation of FEMA as well as customs, because he is doing smuggling. Then under Income Tax Act, because he is not disclosing the full income. Then whether there is any violation under PMLA? Yes, because he in the income tax return he is showing income from trading activities, not from smuggling, or income from consultancy or whatever. So he has disguised. So he has laundered the money also. So violation under PMLA. Then whether under Black Money Act? Yes, because out of the total sum rupees 2 crore he is retaining abroad, which is undisclosed bank account. So undisclosed foreign asset has come into existence. So then there will be violation under Companies Act, because he is doing forgery in the books. So fraud in the books. So SFIO will also come into picture. Section 447 and section 212 bracket 8 of Companies Act will also be attracted, and consequently if it is listed company, SEBI will also come into picture, etc., etc. So one action, but many offences have taken place into one total action, and that is how cumulative application of various laws will be possible in this particular case. So as I said, that the most common ingredient found in violation of laws related to economic offences is transactions done are Benami in nature. And that is how there has been total overhauling in the entire system because of this new Benami law. And its impact has been seen, will be further seen if people do not mend their ways. So what is Benami in fact? What is Benami? In one line, if somebody asks me that, Mr. Taneja, can you explain what is Benami from a very, very common sense perspective? Very, very lucid and easy understanding. how shall I explain Benami? I would put it something like this, that wherever duality takes place, Benami comes into picture. You know, whenever I give my deliberations with open mind and open heart, and whenever we can informally discuss, so there are certain provisions in the law for which you do not find any logic. You yourself, though you have all the authorities to implement this law, but you yourself would say, what is the logic of creating the provision in this manner? So I say many of the provisions under Benami law, they derive their logic from a legislation which is 5,000 years old. When I traveled back into the history, I could reach back up to 5,000 years old, and I could lay my hands back on a legislation whose name is Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So I would demonstrate before you that many of the logics are derived therefrom. For example, let me begin with this, that the concept of Benami has been picked up from the concept of duality and non-duality. So we are connected with the Supreme, or we are supposed to remain connected with the Supreme. The problem arises when that disconnection takes place from that Supreme energy. In whatever form of life we are, the struggle doesn't matter. Hard work doesn't matter. Any problem may come, may go, doesn't matter much. What matters most is the moment disconnection happens. Then I become at my own, then I become restless, because duality takes place. One is him and another is me. So that duality has taken place. So then problem comes in our life. So long as I am connected, my identity is that I am connected, then no problem. Whatever problems are there, that will be negligible. They will be felt to be negligible. So similarly here also, when duality is created, in what manner? I will explain with the help of this example, this slide, that how the duality will take place here. Now there is seller B, and Mr. A wanted to purchase the property from Mr. B. So A makes the payment to Mr. B. B transfers the property along with title and possession to Mr. B. There is no problem so long as it happens like that. But if another person, say C, is introduced by Mr. A, and the seller transfers the title to Mr. C, gives the possession or the right of beneficial use to Mr. A, and the money is also paid by Mr. A to Mr. B, then Benami comes into play. Meaning thereby, only title is held by Mr. C, everything else remains as it is, as it would have been done in the first example, that is with Mr. A. So if the things are like that, then it is very, very difficult to save this transaction from any action from the department now, because it will be treated as Benami under the definition given in new law. Though the old law was also like that, earlier also the things were like that only, that there was section 9, there was 1988 Act was brought out, but since implementation agency was not created, it remained a paper tiger only. So that is why it could not be implemented well. But now in 2016, the whole law has been amended, and earlier there was only 9 sections. Now around 72 sections are there. So, but it has not been repealed. The earlier law has not been repealed, and it is not like that the earlier law repealed and new law brought out. No, though I mean the law has been amended 90%, more than 95%. Even the definition itself has been amended. But in its wisdom, the legislature has amended the old law itself. So let us try to understand. Before I come to the present understanding and definition, there used to be a time when Benami transactions were expressly allowed by the law, which you must know the background. So therefore, you can remain connected with the ground realities. So the thing was like that Indian Trust Act 1882 allowed Benami transaction to happen. There are 4 sections, 81, 82 and 94 of Indian Trust Act. When you will read, you will find that what I am saying is the truth, that the British rulers said that a person can do Benami transaction and rights of the real owner will be protected. Then our own Indian Income Tax Act, you may not be probably aware of, or you may know, it may have skipped from your attention, that our own Indian Income Tax also allowed Benami transaction to happen. Section 281A of Indian Income Tax Act 1961 allowed Benami transactions to be done with only one condition, that its reporting should be done to the jurisdictional commissioner or chief commissioner. That's all. And if it is done, then no problem. If it is not done, then also no problem. No punishment, no attachment, nothing. The only thing was that the right to recover the property by way of a suit would come to an end by the beneficial owner. That's all. Then how the change came? Change started in 1969 when the assignment was given to the Law Commission that to find out whether any such law should be brought out, because many violations are taking place in the country, and because of which it is denting the economy. So then in 1974, first report came. It was reported, yes, Benami law should be introduced. Nothing happened till 14 years. 1988, new law was brought out, but very crisp, very hastily drafted, which was made the act in September 1988. And the definition was very vague, very short, devoid of anything. So therefore, all those things happened. I think nothing could be done. In 2013, probably the bill was again introduced, and then Parliament Standing Committee under the leadership of Mr. Virappa Moily presented its comments in 200-300 pages report, where it said that this law is going to be very harsh. Amendments should be brought out. Only then this law should be implemented. But despite all that, the government, despite this categorical finding, the government in its own wisdom, legislature is supreme. They thought it fit to implement the law as it is. And this, all these permissions which were given by Income Tax Act, etc., they were all withdrawn. They were withdrawn in 1988 itself. In fact, 280 when A was repealed, and Indian Trust Act sections 81, 82, and 94 were repealed in 1988 itself. So that is how this law in 2016, when it became the Act, was effective from 1/11/2016, came into force. Now, to understand the overview, we need to understand the definition part only, because it is the most exhaustively defined law. I mean, the definition part is quite exhaustive. So it is very sweeping. Nothing else can be imagined which cannot fall here. So whatever a person can imagine, it will find place either in A, B, C, or D. So there it has been divided into 4 parts: Part A, Part B, Part C, and D. Now, A is a classic case, classic example of Benami, that where the property is transferred or held by Benamidar and consideration is paid by the beneficial owner, and property is held for the benefit of the beneficial owner. Both the conditions are cumulative, conjunctive. If only one condition is fulfilled, it will not be Benami. It will be Benami if both the conditions are fulfilled. A, property is transferred in the name of somebody else, used by somebody else, and that somebody else who is using has paid the consideration. So this is classic case. Then B, property held in fictitious name. Now this is, I mean, for the first time I can see a piece of legislation where this expression fictitious has been used. So fictitious, for example, a person is keeping the property in the name of his pets, in the name of goddess, etc., somebody who cannot be recognized as a person in the eyes of law. Then C clause is very important, where a person denies the knowledge about the ownership, or he says I'm not aware about the ownership, he says I'm not the owner, or he says I'm not aware that he's the owner.
I think there's a lot of noise.
Something to be modified.
No issue, sir. Just a minute, sir. Just a minute. Yes, sir. Continue, please. You are on mute, sir. Just can you unmute it? Please unmute and start, sir. You're not audible, sir. Ashwani, sir.
Okay, I did not mute me.
Some technical issue, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
So it is saying people are waiting in the lobby.
It is being taken care of, sir. No problem.
Okay. So how long I have been mute, by the way?
No, just a minute, sir. Half a minute. That's it.
Half a minute only. Okay. So okay, I'll come back to it. So I will come again. Part A is the classic part. All the conditions have to be cumulatively fulfilled. If these are not cumulatively fulfilled, meaning thereby all are not fulfilled, conjunctive reading has to be done, then it will not be Benami. So there have been some mistakes. That is why I am emphasizing on this, that all the conditions have to be proved as having been fulfilled. Now there are few exceptions to this. Exceptions are person acting in fiduciary capacity. For example, executor, trustee, partner, director. Person acting as karta of HUF. Then if it is held in the name of karta on behalf of HUF, it is in exception clause. In the name of spouse. Now, this Benami law is giving different kind of tensions and shiverings to different kind of people. So as a kind of tension comes, so comes the emotions and so comes the question. So somebody asked me out of his deep-rooted tensions which he might be facing, sir, it is all right spouse, but the question arises, who's the spouse? So I said, don't be too excited. It is mentioned clearly on the law that it is his or her spouse only. So then the next question immediately came up. Acha sir, whose child means what? So no, not from that angle which you might be thinking. My question is child up to what age? So spouse means his or her spouse. Child means child of any age. Then brother, sister, lineal ascendant or descendant. So lineal ascendant descendant will include grandchildren, grandparents, and brother, sister, and parents also will be included. But there is one condition invoked here that it should be in joint ownership, and the consideration should be paid out of known sources. This word known is also used, I mean, for the first time by the legislature. I had not read it anywhere else. So it is not disclosed or declared. It is known sources. So it has to be read in that manner only. Now, if I buy a property in the name of my mother, whether it will be Benami? Yes, it will be Benami, because it has to be in joint ownership. Only then I will get the benefit exception. So the law is very clear. If something falls in category A, part A, but it is not enjoying the benefit of any exception as given hereunder, then it will be Benami. Whether there is an intention to hold Benami, whether there is no intention to hold Benami, it does not make a difference. Similarly, B, property held in fictitious name. Then C, if somebody is not aware about the knowledge of not aware of the ownership or denies the ownership. Then D is very, very important, which most of our officers are concerned about. That, sir, how this D will be applicable and whether there will be cumulative application. Now D talks about a situation where the pair of the consideration is not traceable or fictitious. So meaning thereby a person holds a property, but he says, I do not know where from this money has come, who has paid me, etc., etc. Or whatever name he takes, that name is found to be fictitious. So if this is the situation, then it will be straight away Benami. But kindly try to understand properly that it will be applicable only when a person is saying that somebody else has paid the consideration. Suppose he is saying, I have myself paid the consideration, it is my property, then even if the consideration is not explained properly, the sources are not explained properly, it cannot be invoked under D. Then it would be liable to be taxed under section 68 or 69 of Income Tax Act only. So there will arise the mutually exclusive situation. Both the sections cannot be applied. There has been a mistake, and that is how Honorable Telangana High Court has given in its judgment, which was recently argued in the case of Zara Investment. No, 29 this D cannot be applied, where the department should have invoked section 68 or 69 of Income Tax Act. So though it is quite sweeping, but despite being quite sweeping, it has to be carefully applied. Then what are the authorities? You are all about the authorities. I think I need not develop on much. The power to implement this law has been given on the shoulders of the income tax officers, because for the reasons I mentioned. But please do not presume that merely because this power has been given to the income tax officers, then the laws are same. No, there is, believe me, my dear sirs, my dear friends, there is no similarity. I am marking the words, no similarity between the fabric and texture of the law contained under Income Tax Act 1961 and PBPT Act 1988, Prohibition of Benami Property Transaction Act 1988. Both the laws are different, and therefore it should be implemented in different manner if you want that our action should be sustainable ultimately. Then briefly about adjudicating authority and appellate tribunal only I'll explain. Now adjudicating authority has been replaced by competent authorities. So after the order is passed by the initiating officer, reference is passed under section 24(5), then matter will go to competent authority, means the authority who is competent authority under SAFEMA, that is NDPS and SAFEMA making attachment, etc. That will handle this particular adjudicating part. And after that, matter will come back to the appellate tribunal. It is not the income tax appellate tribunal. It is the appellate tribunal, meaning thereby the appellate tribunal constituted under SAFEMA, COFEPOSA, NDPS, Benami, PMLA, etc. FEMA also. 7 laws it is dealing. And its principal bench and the only bench is located in New Delhi, Lok Nayak Bhavan, which was headed recently by Justice Manmohan Singh, and now it is headed by none. No members are there at the present because the government is in the process of appointing the members. In this slide, I am leaving to save time. The uniqueness of this law, the way this law has been drafted, is that it has been provided under the law that all these authorities whose name I have mentioned, they are duty bound to give information to the concerned BPU about any Benami transaction which is coming to their notice. So the duty is, that means it is on the income tax authorities also. So therefore, basic awareness about the Benami transaction is very essential. Then its interplay with the Income Tax Act. As I said, 68, 69 I have explained. Then GAR, whether it has got a strong interplay with GAR, General Anti-Avoidance Rules, or Principal Purpose Test. So those who are dealing with the international taxation, they will be most inclined to appreciate this part. So I will answer this question with the help of the slide, which I am going to open now. Yes. So interplay with income tax holding structure. Suppose there is a company whose ultimate parent who is, say, set up in USA. Now it wanted to make investment in Indian company, but to take the benefit of DTAA, it adopts a Mauritius route or Singapore route, whatever was beneficial, and sets up one unit in Mauritius, and the Mauritian entity sets up in India, the Indian entity, and makes investment into its share capital. Now, during the course of income tax proceedings, it is found that the structure created in Mauritius is in fact a non-entity kind of structure. The entire control is exercised by the ultimate parent, that is in USA. And accordingly, the treaty benefit is denied, invoking GAR or invoking PPT, Principal Purpose Test. So therefore, treaty benefit is denied and taxes are imposed, etc., etc. Now the next question arises whether it can be treated as Benami also under these circumstances. I think there is one judgment also, AB something of AAR. The judgment is there. I had shared that judgment with Vanna Madam, I think, some time back. So there, that issue has been touched. So now the things will be like that. If there is a finding that the structure at Mauritius is Benami structure, it is non-entity structure. Non-entity means it has no control. So real structure is there means at USA. So that means US company is exercising the control. That means this Mauritius entity is not exercising the control. So real beneficiary is US entity only. So meaning thereby the Indian shares which are held by Mauritian entity, they are held in Benami and the real owner is US entity. So, but the thing is whether Benami law is applicable on the entities held outside or the assets held abroad. No, it is not applicable. This question was asked from the then Finance Minister, late Honorable Shri Arun Jaitley, and then he very beautifully answered it. For outside structures and assets, we have brought Black Money Act. So that means impliedly he said, no, Benami for outside structures. But whether it will not be applicable at all? No, hold on. It will be applicable because the shares are held in India. That asset is in India. So that asset, being a Benami asset, can be attached here. Now, the only thing which is left here is what will happen to the prosecution. Prosecution can be set up within the legal framework and will be liable as and when the entities which are located abroad will come here, etc., etc. Or these are many issues which we will discuss when we will discuss Black Money Act, that how the prosecution of people abroad, etc., their assets abroad will be taken care of. But as of now, let us confine to that it can be applied on foreign structures also if anything is held here in India, part of that. Then significant beneficial owner concept. Now the section 90 of Companies Act 2013 has brought out a very, very significant amendment. And the amendment says that every company is required to give the details of true shareholders. The words used are not true. The ultimate beneficial shareholders who are not the registered shareholders but exercising the full control. And 4 possibilities have been given. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now companies are bound to make disclosure of these information. The moment this information is given, whether it is a ready platter for the BPU or what. So I would say not every information it will automatically attract Benami provisions, but in one of the cases it may attract. Suppose persons are acting in such a manner that person A is acting on behalf of person B, then Benami may come into play. So there is a strong interplay which is going to happen. Burden of proof. Sir, I said in the beginning that income tax law and Benami law may be exercised by the same department, but they are totally different. You know, sir, I will say one thing very important from the core of my heart, because I have been on a small seat of where I had to exercise some judicial functions. You know, what is the most irksome thing to an authority who is reviewing the order of the authorities judicially? The only thing is when they find that there is ingredients of presumptions involved. So one word, presumption, is really seen as alien, seen as something untouchable, seen as something unacceptable to any authority which is reviewing the order judicially. Number one, presumption. Second, something which is liked very much by any judicial authority is application of mind. If presumption is found to happen in the order is bound to be struck down. If the order is based upon application of mind of the person who has drafted it, it will be very difficult to overturn that order. Believe me, whenever I used to dictate the orders, most of the orders I used to give dictations routine. But wherever the feeling was successfully created by the officers, who were discharging, by the person who were arguing before me that, sir, look how much application of mind has taken place. I used to devote a special time to that order in case I wanted to upturn that order, because if application of mind has been done, that means it is that is where comes this need to understand the burden of proof. Whose burden is what? If this principle, if this game of burden is understood properly, the law will be implemented properly. The presumption part will go away. It will be kept away. If this burden concept is not properly understood, the accident is bound to happen, and the too much of labor, whatever labor must have been done, it may prove to be unproductive. So Supreme Court has been time and again saying this. I have placed 3 judgments before you. These are recent judgments, and in one of the latest cases argued before the tribunal by us in Pamela Bhardwaj, these judgments have been applied. It's a very detailed judgment. You can read it if you really want to understand the concept of Benami law. Very detailed judgment in the case of name of Mrs. Pamela Bhardwaj and Ramneek Singh Kochers versus IU. It is available on the site. Then this slide, it is a complex slide. I will explain in very simple words that mere providing of finance is not equivalent to providing of consideration, because that is what has been said by Supreme Court in the case of P. Lilavati also. So consideration has to be paid in terms of consideration, not as finance. Now, this another example I am taking for explaining that how people sitting abroad also be covered under Benami law. This one gentleman bought property in India, which he could not have bought in his name, being agricultural land. So he took help of his friend. Land was purchased in the name of his friend. But when the income tax search proceedings took place, the allegations were that own money has exchanged hands. So that Indian friend was very sober, simple man. He said, sir, I have got nothing to do. This is all because of my friend sitting abroad. I have just helping him, etc., etc. So whatever may have happened in income tax proceedings or not, but 2 laws immediately were implemented upon: one FEMA proceedings, another Benami law proceedings. So BPU has attached that land being Benami. That Indian friend has been treated as Benamidar. Friend sitting abroad has been treated as beneficial owner. Matter belongs to Gujarat. So now in income tax he would have paid tax, not paid tax, but property has immediately gone under Benami law. So that is in nutshell I wanted to talk about Benami, though it is such a vast subject that even if I speak for 2 hours, you will still be having something to ask, something to discuss. But today Devjyoti has instructed me that, sir, okay, small overview I have to give. So with your permission now, I will switch over to another legislation, that is money laundering. So before I touch upon this issue, sir, I just want to ask what you understand in common parlance money laundering. Any guess from your side? Whether conversion of black into white is money laundering. That is what immediately you will think. But if it is money laundering, then what is tax evasion? Because conversion of black into white is tax evasion. It constitutes tax evasion straight away. So that means money laundering is something more than that. And if we want to understand in terms of colors, I will explain that money laundering would mean converting red into white. Now, what is red here? What is the difference between red and black? So black denoted only untaxed money, undisclosed from sources. Red means money earned from a source which involved commission of a crime, an offense in the eyes of law. So that is why as the red denotes blood. So something involving crime, money earned therefrom, which is turned into white. White means here money as if it is earned not from a crime, from clean sources, is money laundering. As its name suggests, changing the color of the money. Now money has no color. So that is where the department is also mixing up the things. No asset or property can be said to be permanently proceed of crime. It depends on the intention of the person who is possessing, on its usage, because money or property has no color. It is not comparable to a situation where a drug is treated, drug item, contraband item, any weapon, because they are intrinsically bad in themselves. Property or money is not, they are not intrinsically bad in themselves. Their user or the person who is possessing them, that may be bad. So we'll try to understand with the help of some example. But before I come to the definition part, you must have definitely heard about it, that people who have been roped in under this law find it very, very harsh, very, very draconian, very, very difficult to withstand. I tried to analyze some of the reasons, and some of the reasons which came to my mind were something like this: that whole web of actions, whole lot of web of actions is created. I am sorry, I am in deliberations. I am into deliberations. For 2 will be at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much. So, firstly, because of involvement of crime, the agencies who are dealing with the crime, they come into motion. Then the agency who has to take care of this money laundering part, they come into action, and the agency that is enforcement directorate also takes up actions into 2 phases, 2 parts simultaneously. One is the financial part, other is the criminal part again. So financial part means attachment of properties, criminal part means prosecution, filing of prosecution complaint. Everything merges in special court. So in special court, 2 kinds of actions are taking place. Third one is taking place before the adjudicating authority and PMLA, and everything is launched simultaneously, parallel. Definition. Let us try to understand the legally also what do we mean by the offense of money laundering. It says, whosoever directly or indirectly attempts to indulge or knowingly assists or knowingly is a party or is actually involved in any process or activity connected with the proceeds of crime, including its concealment, possession, acquisition or use, and projecting or claiming as untainted property, shall be guilty of offense of money laundering. My slides are visible now. If it is not visible, please
yes,
tell me.
sir. Perfectly all right, sir.
So this word "and" I have put in red color. It has a meaning why I have put in red color, because there is some kind of tinkering by the legislation. Some amendment has been brought out, which is being interpreted in many ways by different people. So as we understood, there should be 2 things involved herein. That A, there should be a crime. B, there should be proceeds of crime, proceeds generated from that crime, and C, that proceeds so generated should be portrayed as good money, as untainted. Tainted should be portrayed as untainted. So kindly see, the word "and" has been used in between, meaning thereby 3 conditions have to be used cumulatively, conjunctively. Conjunctive reading has to be done. But now this "and" has been shaken a little bit because of this explanation which had been added with effect from 1st August 2019. It says a person shall be guilty of offense of money laundering, etc., etc., if he does following: concealment or possession or acquisition or use. अब use के बाद जो और add किया है, the word expression added or after the expression use, or projecting, it is making it as optional, as if it is one of the conditions. But whereas the whole concept of money laundering is based on this concept that there has to be portraying of bad money as good money. Otherwise, if you are punishing, if the legislature wants to punish a person for the offense, then he will be punished twice, because for the offense he is being punished. For generation of proceeds, a person does theft. Theft is a scheduled offense, so he will be punished for theft. So for possession of offense of theft, he will be punished twice. I mean, it is not possible unless he claims that the stolen money is good money. He mixes in bank account, buys something else, claiming it as good money. Only then it should come. So this, confusion is taking place. But we are waiting for some good judgments from the court so that certainty prevails on both the sides. And broadly speaking, this part of money laundering can be, it can be described in these three stages. Stage 1, commission of the scheduled offense. Stage 2, generation of proceeds of crime. And stage 3, commission of money laundering by placement, layering, and integration. So these three are put together can only be said to be offense of money laundering. Any one stage missing, it cannot be offense of money laundering. Now, what is proceeds of crime here? Proceeds of crime means any property derived or obtained directly or indirectly by any person as a result of criminal activity relating to scheduled offense, or value of any such property where such property is taken or held outside India, then the property equivalent in the value held within the country or Now you must be wondering that two situations have been created. Why? And there is a reason. If the property is in India, situation A. If the property is located outside India, situation B. So that means property located outside India are also straight away roped in under this law. So if the property is located in India, then only that property can be attached which is derived from proceeds of crime. But if it is property located outside India, that property can be attached. If that is not available, in any property equivalent in value held within the country or abroad can also be attached. So that is the difference between the two. But here confusion has taken place, and in India also those properties are being attached which are not derived from proceeds of crime on the ground that it is equivalent to the amount of proceeds of crime. But on this issue now there is a total clarity. Judgments have come from Supreme Court also in the name of Seema Garg, upholding the judgment of Punjab and Haryana High Court, wherein they said no, proceeds of crime only can be attached in India. There is a judgment of two judgments from Andhra Pradesh High Court in the name of Satyam Computers, and recently from Kumar Pappu, which say only that property which is derived from proceeds of crime, only that property can be attached. What is scheduled offense? So there has to be a scheduled offense. Only then we can talk about generation of proceeds of crime. But what is scheduled offense? Scheduled offense means any offense which finds its place in the list of offences mentioned in the schedule appended to PMLA. PMLA means Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. So whatever is mentioned there, out of that it is picked up, and if it is one of them, and then only PMLA will come into motion. What are the list? List is quite exhaustive, and it is divided into two parts. For one part, the punishment prescribed is for 10 years or more, for other 7 years. So, for example, various sections of IPC, various sections of various other acts like Air Pollution Control Act, Water Pollution Control Act, Prevention of Corruption Act, and Arms and Ammunition Act. So various laws of the country are covered there. Your question would be here whether tax evasion is covered here, whether Income Tax Act law has been mentioned here, whether black money is mentioned there, whether PBBT Act is mentioned there. I will answer all these questions one by one. Income Tax Act has not been mentioned here. None of the provisions of Income Tax Act has been mentioned. None of the provisions of Prohibition of Benami Property Transaction Act has been mentioned. But Section 50 of BMA, Black Money Act, has been mentioned. So therefore, if a person is caught under BMA, he may be caught under PMLA also. What about tax evasion? So people doing tax evasion cannot be roped in by the ED. Tax evasion as such, due to the conscious reasons, has not been mentioned here. But allied activities for doing tax evasion may be covered, like the act of doing forgery, fraud, etc., etc. But so far as no overlapping has been done by the Income Tax Department and its sister department, Enforcement Directorate, both are working into different domains to avoid any chaos and confusions. Reverse burden of proof. Now what is reverse burden of proof? This is one of the most prominent section about which you must have talked from many people. Now, reverse burden of proof here, I would mean that when the burden is upon the person who is accused. Under the foundational concept of our constitution, a person is presumed to be innocent unless he is proved guilty. And the burden to prove that he is guilty is upon the person who is alleging him to be guilty. Now, this principle has been compromised a little bit under this law. But mind it, it has been compromised a little bit. These words are forgotten a little bit. So what is being done is that as if the entire burden is shifted. That cannot be. Because there are three stages, as I mentioned. A person has done, say, theft, scheduled crime, then he has earned some money from, and then he has portrayed it as good money. So whether he has done theft, how it can be presumed to be shifted? It will shake the entire fundamental principle of our criminal jurisprudence. This has not been shifted at all if you read this law. Then whether I have earned money therefrom after doing theft, whether a person has earned money or not, how can this burden be shifted? This has to be also upon the person who is alleging. Only third burden has been shifted, that if the crime has been done, money has been earned, whether it has been portrayed as good money, this burden is upon the person who has earned such bad money. Okay, now you prove you are not portrayed it as good money. So offense of that part of money laundering only has been shifted, not the earlier two stages. And that theory, that principle you can pick up from a recent judgment also, coming from Chhattisgarh High Court, Honorable Chhattisgarh High Court, in the name of Mr. Anil Tuteja, who happens to be some secretary of Chhattisgarh, special secretary of Chhattisgarh, sitting special secretary. He was roped in by ED, and then matter went to High Court, and then High Court has given the judgment. This Bitcoin thing we can skip to save time. Now, one of the most prominent thing which is happening in ED today is this bank default case. So with the help of this, you'll understand how the things are happening. Suppose a company, very big company, borrowed loan aggregating to rupees 1,000 crore from a bank, and somehow the company went bankrupt. It defaulted in repayment of loan to the bank. The bank officials analyzed the things and felt that there have been some wrongdoings on the part of company by way of obtaining the loan in fraudulent manner or by making its end use in impermissible manner. So accordingly, it files an FIR before the CBI, that is the investigation agency. Now the moment CBI comes into investigation, so comes the Department of Enforcement, Directorate of Enforcement, on the ground that this act of doing fraud is a scheduled offense. Money obtained therefrom, that is 1,000 crore, is proceeds of crime. So whatever properties are obtained from proceeds of crime, the same are liable to be attached under section 5 of PMLA. And that is how the attachment process begins. Now that is where the role of IRS officers come. I will explain little later. And thereafter, whatever the trail is computed, wherever that 1,000 crore rupees have gone, the entire money is liable to be attached, subject to ifs and buts. Ifs and buts are that suppose a person has done genuine transaction, then that transaction should not be attached, but some things have been mixed up, and everything comes which is on the way of the ED, that is liable to be attached, and that is being attached in all over the country. So it creates a kind of cascading effect, that because the company who has took such a huge loan, I mean, he must have done huge number of transactions. So all such entities and persons, all these transactions, they are hit under this law, and that is how it creates a wide spectrum under its coverage. This Bitcoin thing I'm leaving for the time involved. So as I said, that certain things are happening where the right and wrong has been mixed up. So the role of the IRS officers come where, because of their experience, their skill, they can play much better role. That is why you must have noted that during the last order of transfer, many persons on deputation have been placed on the deputation with the ED, because the kind of experience IRS officers have, that is very, very useful here. As I said in this example, the challenge is computation of correct amount of proceeds of crime, which is not possible to be done by the judges, by the officers who are not from tax background or finance background, by the lawyers who are from criminal background. So far, all the agencies involved in implementation of this law were not proving to be sufficient to tackle this aspect of the matter, that whether money laundering has taken place, if yes, how, to what extent, in what manner, where the assets are lying and all that. So I made a small checklist that how you can do that. That, for example, finding out the sources and quantifying amount of proceeds of crime from commission of an offense, identifying the proceeds to be attached, identifying the sources of such properties and connecting it with the POC, identifying loan utilization in the attached property, calculation of the correct value of the POC, valuation of the property attached in comparison with the alleged POC, proper financial accounting and analysis, then preparation of money trail for the attached properties to demonstrate the sources of funds. Because a very, very exhaustive exercise, if it is to be done very fairly, accurately, legally, very, very difficult exercise. So that's all about money laundering. Now, if you will permit, I will within 5 minutes or so, I will try to touch upon the provisions of Black Money Act. So friends, as I said that the need of the act arose because none of the legislation was able to cover those situations where the wrongdoers were stashing their money abroad. So that is how, because and second, there was time limitation also. So to overcome these two situations, this act under the name of Black Money, Undisclosed Foreign Income and Asset and Imposition of Tax Act 2015 has been introduced. As its name suggests, in fact, the black money word is here, I can say, a little redundant. The real correct name is Undisclosed Foreign Income and Asset Act. Taxation of, it should be rightly worded as Taxation of Undisclosed Foreign Income and Asset Act. Now I will deal 2 or 3 provisions only. First of all, section 3 is the charging section. It says there shall be charge on every assessee for every assessment year commencing on or after the first day of April 2016, a tax in respect of his total undisclosed foreign income and asset of the previous year at the rate of 30% of such undisclosed income. So 2 things become clear, that it has to be implemented after first day of April 2016. But whether on the earlier asset and otherly income, that is a question of debate and discussion. But it has to be implemented with effect from the things happening on first day of April 2016. And what do you mean by the things? 2 things only. Undisclosed foreign income and asset, meaning there are foreign asset located outside India which is not disclosed, and undisclosed income earned outside India from outside sources which is not brought to tax here in India. That's it. Simple and straight. Now, broadly speaking, it can be divided into 2 parts. Part A, undisclosed foreign income, and Part B, undisclosed foreign asset. Now, undisclosed foreign income means an income which has not been disclosed in the return filed here in India, or in respect of which return was required to be filed but return is not filed. That is undisclosed foreign income. Simple. So meaning thereby it will definitely be applicable only on those which will happen on post 2016 only. Here the issue of retrospective or non retrospective will not arise as far as this element is concerned. Second thing to be noted here is that no deduction in respect of any expenditure or allowance or set off of any loss will be given. Meaning thereby some person says ki, okay, all right, I have earned that income there, but this is a loss arising here. No set off, no loss, nothing. So it will be taxable. But taxable will be what? Gross income, not gross receipt. So not turnover, income arising from that turnover. Now the second part is undisclosed foreign asset. The definition of undisclosed foreign asset is very, very important. It is not merely saying confining to something which is located outside India and which is undisclosed here in India is foreign asset. No, it is second condition also. A, it should be disclosed here in India. B, it should be disclosed to the satisfaction of the assessing officer under BMA. Both the conditions have to be cumulatively fulfilled. Most of the persons are presuming that if an asset is located outside India and if it is disclosed in India, that is the end of the matter. No, that is where the most important peculiarity of this entire legislation in this BMA is this, that it talks about the opinion and satisfaction. And friends, whenever we talk about opinion and satisfaction, please do not mistake it as with your personal opinion or satisfaction. It talks about satisfaction based upon the sound judicious principles. If you really want your action to be sustained by the higher judiciary, then following two items have to be deducted therefrom. What are those items? Once we will aggregate it, these two items have to be deducted. What are those? The income which has been assessed to tax for any assessment year under Income Tax Act prior to assessment year to which BMA applies. Suppose income is of such nature, it is accumulated now, available in this form of undisclosed foreign asset, but its corresponding income has already been assessed. That has to be deducted. Any income which is assessable or has been assessed to tax for assessment year under BMA from and after assessment year 2016-17, that is also to be deducted. Then thereafter it has to be aggregated in this manner, and that is how the tax is to be levied, which is at the rate of 30%. And in case taxes are imposed, then penalty is also leviable at the rate of 60%. So aggregate becomes 90%. And apart from that, a person is liable to be prosecuted under section 50, 51, 52, 53, etc. under different provisions, penal provisions, non-disclosure provisions, etc. Suppose everything is all right, but the person has not made disclosure, otherwise it is explained asset, then also there is a penalty provision of rupees 10 lakh. So this is broadly about the what should I say, about the three laws, the basic overview. I have overshot many time despite taking it too fast as I could do, but I can understand that the law is such that any length of time is not sufficient, but I don't know whether I have been candid in my approach in explaining my thoughts or not. I tried my best. Now I can request the organizers, Vanna ma'am and Dev bhai, to take up the questions and issues, whatever is coming to your mind, and I can stop the share screen with your permission.
Thank you, sir. Sir, thank you for your presentation. Now I would like to request Shahnawaz sir to ask few questions to you based on these laws itself. So I request Shahnawaz sir to take it forward, sir. Please.
Okay. Thank you, Pranay. Pranay, I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sir, thank you very much for a very comprehensive view of all the three laws in a very short time available with you for this session, sir. And actually, you have covered a lot of aspects of these three laws and their interplay, which will come into while we are dealing with these cases. However, sir, there are certain issues we wanted to discuss with you, which may be helpful to the participants of this panel discussion. To start with the last topic which you covered, sir, undisclosed offshore assets. In that law, sir, the law, as you rightly said, is not Black Money Act, but it is undisclosed foreign income and assets. Now, one of the query is, sir, it happens the jurisdiction is vested with the officer under Black Money Act when the assets come into his attention, and then the jurisdiction is given by the PDIT or the additional commissioners have there in the field. Now, my query is, sir, what happens many a times when you come about these leaks and all? So the act says that it should be undisclosed. So what should undisclosed means? Because now what we have seen that many a cases when this investigation goes on about the offshore assets and before the Black Money Act is initiated or invoked, the assessees also declare in the return of income. So it may be an asset which has been acquired a long back in the time, but when the investigation starts, they disclose in the return of income and under the Income Tax Act. So in that scenario, how will it interplay with the Black Money Act? Because there is a provision that if you assess something in Black Money Act, it cannot be assessed under Income Tax Act. And the other thing is what you talked about, sir, is kind of credit which has to be given, though it pertains to prior to 16-17. So what was the scenario there, sir?
No, very good question you are asking, sir. In fact, this is going to be one of the most crucial questions in the implementation of the entire law. I will begin my thoughts on this by reading this the definition of undisclosed asset located outside India as is contained under section 211. Means an asset located outside India, held by assessee in his name, or in respect of, these words are very important, or in respect of which he is a beneficial owner and he has no explanation. So number one, there should be assets should be located outside India. He should be beneficial owner. and he has no explanation about the source of investment in such asset, or the explanation given by him in the opinion of the assessing officer should unsatisfactory. So meaning thereby to come out of the clutches of this section, 4 things he has to do. Number 1, it has to be disclosed. It has to be disclosed first of all. Number 2, he has to offer an explanation. And number 3, the explanation should be to the satisfaction of the officer. These 3 conditions. And number 4th one is that disclosure should also be with the proper norms. So these 4 things have to be proved simultaneously. Only then the rigors of this section can be avoided by a person in India. So if an asset has been disclosed by him, then all right, then he may still be asked, okay, give me the sources, okay, still be asked. Though with due respect, I mean to all the sides, some kind of amendment or clarification is required here. If a person has been duly disclosing the asset, then in that case, to what extent there should be obligation upon him, because what are the parameters of the satisfaction or the opinion of the officer? That is a question which remain unanswered here, because it is not mentioned that on what basis the officer will be satisfied. Suppose a person has earned the money from some sources which have already been taxed, and whether still that property can be brought to be undisclosed. So I think the purpose of putting this expression here is, the whole objective of the scheme is to rope in all those things on which tax has been evaded. So the moment the person is able to demonstrate with the help of evidences that on this I have not evaded any tax, and this is how the sources are there, then I think in the opinion and the consideration of in the opinion of the assessing officer, it should be treated as satisfactory. That is how I would like to opine, though it has not been mentioned, but the purpose of the object will be fulfilled in this manner only.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, the other thing is like when we talk about the PMLA and most of the economic offenders which have now like shifted overseas and they have created offshore assets and all. So when ED investigate those cases involving bank frauds and all, like present cases of Mehul Choksi, Nirav Modi, etc. So they attach the offshore assets. And in one of the instances, like in Nirav Modi's case, they said that they attached the assets like diamond stock which was lying in Hong Kong, and they got back to India also. Now, when we make the attachments in Benami Act or for Income Tax Act, etc., so attachments are like initially they are provisional, so we don't kind of sell them or bring into our custody always. So how does the procedure of attachment of offshore assets in ED works, and how do the governments over there respond to these requests? What are the provisions under which it is made? The question is also important, sir, because in Black Money Act, we don't have any measures to attach the offshore assets, and it may be a difficult case for recovery when we don't have commensurate Indian assets. So can any of those provisions like AMLAT or something can be used in the Black Money Act also, sir?
Now, I will give my thoughts on this, and I will also request our respected R.N. Dash sir to give his views, because Dash sir has been working extensively with as DG International Tax, then became Chief Commissioner, then I also become Chairman of the PMLA Tribunal. So he is well versed with the working of the ED also. So once I will conclude, I will request Dash sir if you can also unmute yourself and please add on to whatever I will say. Now, the basic distinction between PMLA law and any other law is that PMLA law has got the extraterritorial jurisdiction. Why? Because this PMLA law is birth of the global requirement, in fact, global phenomena. In way back in 1998, when KG Bansal Saab was also part of drafting of the law, one who became later on a tribal member, and then he retired from there. So at that time, it was requirement coming from the United Nations member countries that mean to curb the menace of money laundering arising because of the need of the criminals in perpetrating their jobs of smuggling, drug trafficking, ransom, arms dealing, etc., etc. So to curb that, it was necessary to break the backbone by curbing this money laundering exercise. So that is how all member countries agreed, and resolution was passed, and that is how India also brought out this legislation. So broadly, it was brought out to curb that menace, not to take care of the domestic laws which the present structure, present form takes place. So therefore, there has been deformation to that extent, I will say. because something which is created for purpose A is being used for purpose B. So therefore, that is why this document is taking. But that is why it happened that it got extraterritorial jurisdiction. There are agreements whereby one ED department of one country helps the other ED department on mutual help basis. For example, you must have noted few months back, agencies of Mexico requested Enforcement Directorate of India to attach certain bank accounts because the allegation was some corruption money of the erstwhile government functionaries were deposited here in Indian bank accounts in some other forms. So immediately action was taken. All those bank accounts were attached. So similarly, Indian government agencies also take help of the foreign elements, and that is how it do. Now coming back to your Black Money Act thing. Now section 50 is part of the scheduled offence. So once it is part of scheduled offence, effort can be made to treat it as a proceeds of crime. The moment it is proceeds of crime, then ED can take power and make the attachment of the same. Now whatever Desab can also want to say something if he is still there, I would request and welcome Desab to, because his rich experience can be immensely useful here for our audience. Mr. R. Dash.
Thank you very much, Sunil. It's a real pleasure seeing our younger colleagues taking so much of interest in subjects like this in our times. I don't think people are doing like this. So I must congratulate them first. Then second thing, coming to your subject, it is because of the statute. PMLA has reciprocal arrangements with other countries so that the attached property can be brought under here. And that will also be subject to confiscation much later. Much later means after the trial court proves him guilty. It can be brought here. It can be kept under the custody of administration of the government, but its confiscation can become possible much later. We do not have similar provisions under Benami Act or extraterritoriality, as Suniji told you. But in case of a Black Money Act, if you carefully look at sections 30 onwards, particularly 38, you will find it gives you under 38, the tax recovery officer can approach the Central Board of Direct Taxes, or whereby the TPDT, wherever bilateral arrangements exist under the treaty, will be able to attach the property through the revenue service of the foreign country. It is possible. It is, since it is not resorted to regularly, and frankly, I would suggest the tax recovery officers require lots of handholding, because when I was commissioner to attach the cars of tax delinquents, so they could not do anything. So I had to practically prepare all the orders and made him sign and get it done. So 1-2 cars are attached and sold. Immediately people started paying up because it becomes status symbol. So the thing is that section 38 can be resorted to, as roundabout way was seen that section 50 of a this act, BM Act, can be used to approach the PMLA, but once the PMLA attaches, it becomes a proceeds of a crime and they will take it. Yes. It will not satisfy the tax demand outstanding on your records. Yes. So you will not be happy about that. So you can make a person suffer, but you will not be able to do you will not conclude your own business. So that is what I would say, that section 38 would be probably a better idea. Please, sir, whenever there is a chance, please explore that.
Sir, thank you very much, sir. Taneja sir, like you also gave an example of an offshore transaction where we were discussing that if a Mauritius entity where beneficial owner lies in USA, for example, and they have invested in Indian company. So we were saying that under PBPT, this the shareholding which we hold in India is a property which is Benami, and it can be probably attached under Benami Act. But my question here is, sir, like in this scenario, the Benamidar lies outside India. So which we have seen in the the PBPT Act, for initiating the proceeding, we have to first serve a notice on the Benamidar because it exists. So in this scenario, do we have the extraterritorial jurisdiction to actually issue a notice and serve on the Benamidar? Because the attachment of the property is a subsequent thing. The transaction and the persons involved are the primary thing, probably, sir. Sir, your views on that?
Very good question. The substantial law is applicable. Now the difficulty will be in procedure. So as far as procedures are concerned, that can be taken care of. The substantial law is applicable. So Indian assets are held in India. They are within the control of Indian authorities. Say these are with ROC, with the companies. So I think the notice can be given to the company, and the notice can be mailed also on the address given by the company, because if some entity is holding Indian asset, so it is supposed to give its description also. So notice can be sent. So therefore, once the notice is sent, it will be obligatory upon them to reply if they want to protect legally their assets held in India. That is how procedure will happen.
Sir. So now further going into attachments, sir, like a lot of Benami cases, Benami attachments took place during the time of demonetization. And there were instances where cash was deposited in Benami accounts, and then the cash was subsequently siphoned off. So by the time we initiated our proceeding, there was no money in the bank account. So in such scenarios, like what is the property which is to be attached?
So that is the difference between the tax law, between the PMLA law and Benami law. This is a basic distinction. Under tax law, if the tax is not paid, it can be recovered from the estate of a person. But under PMLA and under PBPT Act, it is not like that. That is what I am saying. These are not recoveries of the tax, as arrears cannot be recovered. So, for example, under PMLA, there is a lack of basic understanding. If the proceeds of crimes are extinguished, nothing can be attached, because the whole purpose of bringing out Section 5 is to protect and to prohibit the proceeds of crime. Suppose a person did gambling, suppose a person did theft, and in the gambling he lost the entire money in the casino. What will you prohibit? His other property? No, it is not tax recovery. That is my little understanding. The law does not permit it, because the law wanted to prohibit the proceeds of crime. They are already gone. Similarly, under Benami property, the property is exhausted, my friends.
Sir, in the same sequence, sir, like sometimes what happens, we may identify a property which is 2 crores is like Benami cash deposits in the bank account, and total deposits are say 20 crores, and now the amount has been invested in creating in construction of a sugar, say a factory. So only 2 crores was the Benami amount, and the proceeds of that Benami are lying in the sugar factory. But we don't know, like, so in these scenarios, when we have a block of assets over there, out of which only 2 crores out of 20 can be attributed to a Benami transactions, under such circumstances, how do we attach that property? Like normally, yes.
Very good. Here, before I answer this question, the most important exercise in Benami law is to identify the property, Benami property, particularly in complex transactions. The mistakes happens in identifying the Benami property. For example, whenever investment is made in shares, and then that invested amount is invested by that company recipient of the amount somewhere else. So here, what is Benami property? Here, the Benami property is shares, not anything else. But whereas in most of the cases, I have found that the money has been treated as Benami property, because in lieu of the money, shares have been allotted. So shares become the Benami property. So therefore, attaching itself will be wrong exercise, number one. But let us presume another area where what you are saying is that bank account was Benami, let us presume. So if bank account is Benami, its entire, wherever that money is going, that everything is Benami, so long as it is held Benami. Once it goes out of the clutches of the Benamidar, another person is taking it as a genuine transaction, then provisions of Section 27, which provides protection to the bona fide purchaser, comes into play. But until that 27 benefits comes into play, any asset which is being created out of that can be attached. And if it has become a complex asset, attachment can be made to the extent of rupees that much, which is there involved in the Benami.
Okay, so it can be done to the extent of attaching that property. Yes. So now coming to the issue of this effective date of PBPT in operation. So because as we know, there was a 1988 Act and amended by a 2016 Act. So like revenues point is that it is like old Act we are kind of implementing. but the SSs in many cases have taken it to the courts and said that only 2016 onwards it should be applicable because there was no machinery provision earlier and so. So what's the present position of litigation on this issue, sir? Like where do we stand in your view, sir?
I think in the economic laws, all the economic laws put together, this is the biggest question our country is facing today. And when you ask me that, sir, what will happen to the past transaction, मैं एक और question पूछता हूँ. Let me ask that question to you. What will happen to the future transaction? Meaning thereby the future time limit. Meaning thereby if transaction has been done today, within how much period that transaction can be covered by the agency under this law. I mean, there is a prescribed period of 3 months, 4 months, 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, or lifetime. Similarly, past also, to what extent if I can go back to past, how long? So I remember that thing which I said, that what Shri Krishna said. What Shri Krishna said that time is eternal. It has no beginning, no end. समय अनंत है ना, इसका प्रारंभ है ना अंत है. So taking cue from that only, this entire piece of legislation, I salute to the makers. It has been made a timeless beauty. No future time limit, first of all. First, with regard to past, though it has not been made specifically retrospective, because if it would have been made immediately struck down, so did not make. What the legislature did was, section 1.3 has been retained as it is, which is creating a ridiculous situation. So if you will argue strongly, court may say it is a ridiculous situation, we will not read section 1.3, which is a commencement section, qua new law. But the other major problem is user of the word held in section 2.9a, which says property is transferred or is held. After comma, it is held. So that is a separate compartment, held. So held means held today when the action is being taken. Held since when? It is silent. So how this held is to be interpreted, the matter is sub judice before Honorable Supreme Court, though I would say that it has not been argued so far properly, because one judgment was from Niharika Jain, which says it is not retrospective, it is prospective only, but nobody read word held there. Then came the matter from Honorable Calcutta High Court, again word held is not read properly there. Then came Chhattisgarh High Court, it says no, I mean both the judgments are saying it is prospective. Chhattisgarh High Court in the case of Tulsi Ram is saying it is prospective also. So 3 case judgments are there, and matter is presently pending before Honorable Supreme Court in Ganesh Dealcoms matter. There are few other judgments like Ishrat Jahan and one other judgment, Bombay High Court, but they are not with PBPT, though they have touched upon PBPT Act, but not in the context of this section 2.9, etc. They have said in the context of some civil dispute. So this matter is anybody's guess. How Supreme Court will deal, I really can't say. Let's see, we get opportunity to argue. I mean, let me see from which side I get opportunity to argue. Because lawyer can argue from any side.
Yes, sir. So one more thing in this context, sir, like both in the Benami Act and the Black Money Act. So when we initiate a proceeding in these acts, and like for example, in the Benami Act, we identify some property or some Benami transaction, we initiate the proceeding, identifying certain Benami properties. Similarly, in the Black Money Act, when something comes to our notice, we give the jurisdiction to the assessing officer to initiate the proceeding under Black Money Act. Now, in both these scenarios, it may be a possibility that subsequently, while we have initiated the proceedings, we may come across about more Benami properties which were not covered in the initial jurisdiction notification or the show cause notice which we had issued. So in these scenarios, like we have to start a separate proceeding, or it can be merged into the proceeding which has already been initiated either under Black Money Act or the PBPT Act.
ये आपने बड़ा अच्छा सवाल किया है. मैं इसलिए क्योंकि ये मैं देख रहा हूँ इसमें बहुत गलतियां हो रही हैं. I mean I can't resist myself from saying jurisdictional is a very, very important aspect in our constitution. Assumption of jurisdiction, and assumption of jurisdiction takes place by following the mandatory conditions which are prescribed under the law. For example, under PBPT Act, jurisdiction is assumed by recording of reasons. Only then section 24 notice is issued. Now suppose reasons are recorded for property A. Now during the course of proceedings, it is found that property B is also there. Can you cover property B? Answer is no, because you have not assumed jurisdiction for property B, number 1. Number 2, you have covered the jurisdiction, say, applying 2.9a. But during the course of proceeding, you find that 2.9a is not applicable. So can you apply 2.9d straight away? But you have recorded in the reason 2.9a only. So either reasons are bad or order is bad. If any one of them is bad, whole proceeding, the output is bad. Both have to be right, reasons as well as the ultimate output. A to Z, everything is to be all right. Anything going bad, whole process becomes bad. It becomes a spoiled milk. contaminated milk. One drop of poison contaminates it. So these are very important things. That is how even the entire productive exercise gets wasted. Similarly, under BMA,
Yes.
it is peculiarly drafted because section 10 speaks out that the year of taxability will be the year in which it comes to the notice of the officer. Now, officer means what? The assessing officer, of course. Now, assessing officer means what? Assessing officer is not defined under here. Every term has been defined, but assessing officer not defined. But logically speaking, assessing officer should be taken to be assessing officer under BMA only, not assessing officer under Income Tax Act. Okay, let us accept that logic also. But suppose one same officer, say Mr. X. Mr. X was under investigation wing, say in different unit, or say he was in same unit only, and he gets to know, say in 2019, about one undisclosed foreign asset, and then in 2021, that very gentleman is assigned the jurisdiction under BMA. Now, can he take a pleading case, sir, since it has come to my notice in 2021? Though technically speaking, right, but court may view it any manner. So therefore, sometimes we get this feeling, yeah, let us avoid coming into our notice. And whenever we will feel like taking action, only then it can be taken as coming our notice. No, justice and fair play will not be lost. That will be taken care by the court. So the whole productive exercise should not be made as unproductive. So I will say something like this. Difference between the income tax law and the other laws which are brought out now, BMA, PMLA, PBPT Act, there is one distinction. Under Income Tax Act, there are fetters and fetters and fetters in terms of time limits, in terms of assumption of jurisdiction, in terms of the framework, etc., etc. Under these laws, fetters are minimal. Somewhere fetters are non-existing, meaning thereby powers are wide. But whenever powers are wide, believe me, obligations are wider. Obligations of a judicious, fair approach are wider. Presumption of scope is zero. Application of mind is 100% required. Only then in the court of law these actions are going to be sustained, because they would say, court would say, legislature has left everything upon you. You have to see what should be done, what should not be done. You have been given free work so that the fraudsters are not escaped, so that the wrongdoers are not escaped. But that does not mean that even if wrongdoers are not there, fraudsters are not there, they should be treated alike. No, that is what my understanding is.
So no, but in this
scenario,
yes, but in this scenario which we discussed just now, if there's an investigating officer, because now most of the black money assessments are being carried out by investigation wing only, the DDIT is over there. So now if he's a DDIT and he comes to know about one asset, like through exchange of information or anything, but until he is not given jurisdiction by under the Black Money Act, obviously he is not the assessing officer. Second thing is, sir, it may not be a necessity
that he should demand immediate jurisdiction.
It may not also be a necessity that he should do the assessment, because the additional commission, the field may also do it.
No, he should demand. Now, whosoever may be given, at least he should demand. He should write.
Okay, sir. So one last question, then we'll open it to the participants, sir. We discussed that for the ED there has to be a scheduled offense, and we discussed that income tax cases and cannot, like offenses over there are not the scheduled offenses, and similarly in the PBPT Act only section 50 is a scheduled offense. If something happens in section 50, we'll launch a prosecution and all. Now, if the investigating officer comes to his attention comes a offshore asset and he is like initiating an action under Black Money Act, but during the investigation he finds that there has been a scam, underlying scam. It can be a bank scam, it can be an import-export scam, money-based, trade-based money laundering or hawala or anything. Now he shares this information with Enforcement Directorate, which is law enforcement agency. Now, though no offense has been, scheduled offense has been committed under, as per the PMLA, because of this, as per the Income Tax Act and BMM limited scope, as such, there is no scheduled offense. But when I share this information with the Enforcement Directorate, is it the responsibility of the Enforcement Directorate to see that whether some law which could have been a scheduled offense has been violated, or that respective agency has to initiate an action under that particular section, and then only jurisdiction to ED will come?
Respective agency has to first come into play. One of the areas which I have found where we trouble ourselves and we lose our happiness is if we do not do our role. Rather more difficult or more restless part is when we try to assume somebody else's role. That is what my experience have been. There I compromise with my happiness, personal happiness. So I should do my role well, and thereafter I should leave to the other person's role, but after informing well that look, these are the things which you have to take care, and thereafter leave it to the wisdom. We may follow up as per the protocol provided if we want to take it to the logical end, but I mean in a most professional and unattached manner. That is how I would say.
But for the FEMA, like because offshore asset, if they are held to be undisclosed assets, and they are like, so mostly they should also attract FEMA, and should ED be taking action on that?
There may be involvement of FEMA as well. Anything which is connected with the foreign inflow or outflow of foreign exchange in any manner is hit by FEMA.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Now, if you want to share some case study, something where you have found department has done very well on PBPT, because you argue on the side of the like assessees also. So, if you have seen some case where you were impressed.
I would say most of the cases coming under PBPT Act are fantastically being drafted. I mean beyond imaginations, creative mind is being applied. Particularly in one of the cases, those companies who were creating land banks, they have been also treated as Benami, because you know the structure of the infrastructure companies like this. Those who are big colonizers, they do not create land banks themselves. Say there is one infrastructure company who is going to be colonizer and developer, say company I, then it requires say 1,000 acres of land. Then it will appoint a land bank company or set of land bank companies to buy land on their behalf. So in one of the cases, it happened like that. So land banks were created by those companies. Then income tax search took place. Some statements were recorded, and ultimately matter went to BPU. Then all those land bank companies were treated as Benamidar companies, Benamidar of those land. The land was treated as Benami property, and that infrastructure company treated as beneficial owner. Though technically speaking, it may fall in. But now here the legislature will have to formulate a policy, because this is the need of the business to do it like that. Similarly, cases coming from Rajasthan, cases coming from Himachal, cases coming from Chhattisgarh, some parts of Maharashtra also, that there are certain areas where only natives can buy land, say members of scheduled tribe or even natives, etc., etc. Their matters are there in Gujarat also, matters are there in Karnataka also, that where only natives can buy land of particular area in particular manner. But if land acquisition has to take place for the purpose of development, then other person cannot buy unless land change takes place. And change of land use will take place only when properties are held in proper ownerships. So for holding it in proper ownership, nominees are created. Properties are purchased in the hands of nominees. Now those nominees have been treated as Benamidars in many cases. So legally speaking, it may be all right in many cases, not in all. But speaking as a policy framework, speaking as a social fabric of the country, whether it will permanently benefit or it will dent the economy, that is anybody's guess. Because I will give example with the help of this corona thing which we have faced right a few months back, last year, that ultimately steroids are given. But steroids are given in such a manner that the patient is saved, not that the steroid itself will create black fungus, etc. So they have to be given very, very carefully so that the virus part goes away. Another example. Yes, sir.
Sir, you please, sir.
Yeah. You can continue, please.
Yes, sir. So this is like, I'll now request the participants to raise their hands or leave their queries in the chat box so that those can be taken. Sir, I'll be asking a last question, and then we will be opening it for the participants. Yes. There's also an issue in the PBPT Act with the jurisdiction. So, for example, sir, like Benamidar is in my jurisdiction and the beneficial owner lies somewhere else and the property is like in third state. There may also be a scenario apart from that. It can be more complex. Like Benamidar can be a beneficial owner for, Benamidar can be holding this property for some different beneficial owners. So how do we, what is the issue of concern regarding the correct jurisdiction in these cases, and how it has been dealt with, whether they have been contested in the courts and something has come out of that, sir?
Yeah, one case we argued it. It was from Bombay. So Bombay office took the jurisdiction, but whereas neither the property was located in Bombay, nor the Benamidar was located in Bombay, nor beneficial owner. So ultimately tribunal struck down, saying that no, this is illegal exercise of jurisdiction, quashed. Now, as the board has guided, any one of these three if located, that officer, that office or VPU can take up the jurisdiction, whether property is located or Benamidar or beneficial owner. Now the situation will arise where they are widely scattered. So then they have said that whosoever initiates first will have the jurisdiction. More problem will arise when matters will reach to the High Court, because the relevant section of the Act says that High Court will be that High Court where the aggrieved party resides. Now suppose there are 5 Benamidars, 2 beneficial owners, property is located in different. So beneficial owner will be filing in Delhi High Court, Benamidar in Karnataka High Court, another Benamidar in Bombay High Court. So on one common order, 3 High Courts sitting. This thing has never happened because cause of action arises in the home jurisdiction. There are set parameters. Now by making enactment in PMLA and Benami both, now this kind of, because under Income Tax Act, we take High Court, that High Court, where the assessing officer is located, which is one, it will always be one. But here it will be widely scattered. So this kind of situation they have not envisaged. How the High Court, I mean on one High Court, 2 High Courts will be sitting on one order. So probably amendment is needed here on the part of jurisdiction.
Good. So thank you very much, sir, for answering all these queries. I hope it would benefit all of us. Now I request Pranay to take the queries from the participants. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. I request participants to raise their hands so that we can take the questions for some time.
It has been my experience that in the session of Benami, everybody wants to remain Benami.
I think it is because you have explained it in such an exhaustive manner that most of the questions would have been asked there itself. We'll wait for a few minutes and then we'll proceed ahead.
Mr. GR and Mr. Prabhakar C both have raised hands.
GR sir, if you could ask your question, please.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir. I think Mr. Prabhakar is asking the question.
I'm Ramesh, sir.
Right, sir.
Sir, in Benami Act, the exception.
You can switch on your video also, please. Yes.
Okay.
If you want.
Yes. Benami Act, that exception clauses, so that known sources is not there for the trusts.
No, yeah, it is not for trust. Why it is so? That is your question.
Logic, sir. Any logic, sir? Why it's not there for the trust exemptions?
Actually, trust has been given a very good amount of flexibility in terms of any legislation we have seen. So there seems to be the thought to continue that flexibility. But I do not find any precise logic here, because known sources should be for everybody. Now the way country is emerging, the way our Honorable PM is making an endeavor that something unknown should be, forgotten now. Only known things should be there. Act of demonetization and everything, every other action is suggesting this. Every piece of legislation is suggesting this. So I do not find any reason. I agree with you. Next will be taken, please. Mr. Prabhakar.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
My question is regarding this known sources. If you see in the exception, it is mentioned that if the property has been purchased in spouse or child or the brother, sister, lineal, ascendant, descendant out of known sources, why wasn't it what is known sources is not defined? Can we take it to be like undisclosed sources? Because in some cases, Benamidar, they have argued that known source means if the fund has come from another entity, but when you go back to that entity, fund is layered and he has explained the source to be from another entity. Like he is telling it is a known source. But if there's an issue with the that entity, the fund, you will have to go behind that entity and not
in fact, very, very important question you have asked. Very, very important question. Here I get the opportunity to explain something which I wanted to say. As I said, that every legislation has its own scope of operation. Every legislation, and we must respect that. Now, this PBPT has to see primarily that something is known. That's it. Now, whether the known is from out of taxpayer sources, out of untaxpayer sources, for that we have mother legislation, that is income tax law. Once here the parameters are fulfilled, all right. But if parameters are not fulfilled any other way, we have to take action in the other legislation. If the known is from undisclosed, then the Income Tax Act should come into play. as far as the fulfillment of the criteria under Benami is there, it is fulfilled. That is what I perceive. That is how the overlapping can be avoided.
Then, sir, in that case, like, they'll be able to give some or the other explanation for the fund flow.
If they are giving, then it has come to your knowledge. Then income tax department should take action. If something is not taxed, who prevents them? Who stops them? Income tax officers are, all empowered to take up any action. But under Benami law, his responsibility is to describe a thing. He has described.
Okay, if it is from undisclosed sources, like it is like black money, can be,
So income tax department, enforcement directorate, whosoever, role it is, they should take action.
Thank you.
Probably Dash sir wants to suggest something.
Yes, I think this Benami Act and Prevention of Corruption Act both were drafted by same set of people in the Law Ministry Legislative Department in 1988. And the definition known sources were put in a Prevention of Corruption Act also, which the legally means that known sources of income
Sir, your voice is not
has
audible.
been implemented in accordance with the provisions. I'm sorry.
Sir, could you repeat that, please? We lost your voice.
Income from lawful sources and implemented in accordance with the provisions of any law, rules, orders for the time being applicable to any person. That much.
Sir, we lost your question, sir. The voice is breaking. So could you just repeat the question, please?
Repeat the answer.
Oh.
Yes, sir. Repeat the answer. That's sir, please.
No.
You lost your voice.
I'm sorry. It is a known source for the purpose of a Prevention Act, which was drafted simultaneously with this Benami Act, was that it is from lawful sources. Sources have been intended as per law, rules, or procedure to known sources. It may not be known to the Benami officer. It may not be known to the income tax department, but if it has been disclosed, it has been made known to the authority whom it should be known, then it becomes lawfully known sources.
So we can take up another question when Dash sir will be connected well, then we can connect it properly.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. This is Subramanian, sir.
G.
Sir, I have a question from the ED perspective, sir.
Yes.
Sir, in most of the cases, when we are after investigation during search, we find existence of violations of scheduled offences. However, it is also said that the ED will be able to take a case only after an FIR is being filed. Whether the existence of scheduled offences coupled with FIR is a necessity for a ED to take up a case, or existence of scheduled offences alone is a necessity, alone is a sufficient condition for ED to take up a case, sir.
How ED will come into picture, on what basis ED will take action unless the scheduled offence is, alleged to have been committed?
Presuming that, say, income tax department is sharing these details, say most of the case, if we get to know any POCA violations or any violations, sir, if you are sharing the data with the ED sister agency, and whether that is enough for them to take up a case, sir?
That is what I am saying, that ED will be able to allege that offense of money laundering only when proceeds have been generated from the crime, and only then step 3 will come into picture. So to say so, step number 2 has taken place. Step number 1 is essential. Now step number 1, somebody has to prove, somebody has to allege. Otherwise the scenario will be like that, the ED will be judge in its own case, that they themselves will say, yes, let us presume that this offense, because we are alleging, then it should be taken as that offense has taken place. So that will be very highly unconstitutional kind of exercise. So there has to be an agency which should be taking up some cause of action with regard to the scheduled offense.
Sir, I have a counter question to it, sir. The question is, allegation comes only when there is a lack of verifiable facts. I am here having a presumption that during the investigative process, income tax investigation, I have very clear facts that is leading to proceeds of crime and application also, but there is no FIR. So there is no allegation, sir. There are facts here. Based on those facts, whether the offense have been committed, facts are there to it. No FIR is there. In this case, whether ED can take it up, sir.
So that is what, sir, I am saying, that the facts are there, but facts, according to my understand, are the facts which are showing that the offense has taken place. But the competent authority should also say that these are the facts according to which it can be said that the alleged offense has taken place. So whether I have this authority under the law to allege a particular fact as the fact of crime, if I have, all right. If I do not have, then it will be exercising my jurisdiction beyond my capacity. I mean, otherwise, how will the law and order will synchronize with each other in the country? If the roles are not clearly defined and earmarked, then there will be overlapping.
Sir, in this case, then, sir, yes, for this answer, sir, in this case, if ED gets any data pertaining to a violation in schedule offences, then ED can share the data with police, ask them to file an FIR, and then again take the case, sir.
Yes. Then if police is convinced, police finds, yes, this constitutes an offence, and files an FIR, then all other provisions, section 173 report and all that, or CBI or economic offence wing, then whatever process is mentioned in section 5 onwards, that needs to be followed simultaneously, and other steps which are within the power of and framework of ED, that will also be done. That in attachment of section 5, filing of prosecution complaint under section 44, read with section 45, read with section 3. But first of all, platform has to be there. Edifice has to be there on which the building is to be built.
Clear, sir. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you.
Sir. Prabhakar, sir, last question from your side, sir. Prabhakar, sir, you want to ask a question?
I think Pranay, he has already asked, but now he has not put his hand down. That's why.
Okay. Sorry, sir. No other questions. Question has been answered regarding the known sources issues. Thank you.
So last sentence I will say like this: with the help of these laws, I understand the concept of life also, and probably through our legislature, the message which we are getting is that get rid of Benami life and live real life. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you, sir. Now I'll go ahead with the vote of thanks. Thank you, sir. In limited time span, we have covered most of the questions. Sir, first of all, I would like to extend sincere thanks to Principal Chief Commissioner of Income Tax, Shri DC Patwari, sir, for sir's constant encouragement and motivation. We are thankful also to Principal Chief Commissioner of Income Tax, Shubhashree Ananthakrishnan ma'am, who has joined us today. Ma'am has constantly infused confidence to the team and giving strength to our team every now and then. Team IRS Dialogues is thankful to Principal CIT Shri Zakir Thomas sir, without whom this idea would not have seen light of the day. I would like to thank Principal CIT Debjyoti Das sir, who is leading this initiative. Sir has not only actively pursued this idea, but sir's leadership and faith in young officers like me has definitely ignited fire in us. Here at IRS Dialogues, we are deeply grateful to the Speaker of the Day,
Shri Ashwani Taneja sir, for joining us today's session. Sir, your academic and professional qualifications were sufficient to give a glimpse of what we were going to hear from you today. You have lucidly brought all the complex issues under an umbrella and presented to us. So you have not only explained provisions of law, but also presented interesting case studies and clip arts in your presentation. Your creative reference to Bhagavad Gita and philosophical touch to the topic under consideration has definitely mesmerized all of us. We thank you for your words of appreciation for competencies and capabilities of officers of the IRS during your presentation. Last but not the least, I thank all the participants for joining us today. Your presence in large numbers has thrilled us, and it has kept us on our toes to come up with new ideas. We hope to see you soon in the coming sessions of IRS Dialogues. With these words, we conclude today's sessions. Thank you
very much to all the learned officers participating.
Have a good day, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.